What's going on, everyone? Drew Brown here, back with another absolutely amazing animanga, or AAA for short. Anyway, tonight I have a special treat for you all. Have you ever thought to yourself, I wish I could watch an anime that stars Yukiko Amagi from Persona 4 and Edward from Cowboy Bebop that's made by many of the same people who worked on Serial Experiments Lain? Well, if so, you're in luck, because Nia Under 7 might be right up your alley. Now before I get into the meat of this weird show, let me give a little background. Nia was adapted from a manga series by Yoshitoshi Abe, who you might recognize as the character designer of Serial Experiments Lain, a show I reviewed last semester. It was adapted by, well, a bunch of people who worked on Lain as well, working on the psychological brooding project that was Lain was so rough on the staff that the producer Yasuyuki Ueda was like, guys, how about we do the funny manga our buddy wrote about the little alien girl? And thus, the anime adaptation of Nia Under 7 was born. Nia begins with the main character, Mayuko Chigasaki, who's a poor girl that's just trying to make ends meet. She works hard at her jobs and does her best to make sure she just stays afloat. She's down to earth, polite, and honest. Then there's Nia, who lives with Mayu. She's chaotic, somewhat greedy, extremely easygoing, and carefree. These two share an apartment with each other and get into tense arguments about food and even blow up the roof once or twice. When I began Nia, I definitely felt some of the melancholy atmosphere of Lain seeping through the cracks. There's bits and pieces of the overall presentation, but Nia makes itself distinct. Lain has a very open-air feel to it, presenting many wide-open, lingering shots of the empty town, telephone wires, computers, and the like. Nia presents that same open-air feel, but in a somewhat different setting. Nia takes place in the countryside. Many of those open-air shots remain, but they're of the bathhouse or the alien mothership, or just some trees or something. Unlike Lain, however, Nia will reel itself back in with some short bursts of slapstick, usually involving Nia being up to no good. Almost as if to keep the show ungrounded? I think that's a term. Anyway, I personally think these slapstick moments are great and that they help to break up the melancholy moments of the show and counteract Mayu's deep personal moments. Let's focus on Mayu for a second. She's my favorite part of the show. She's just such a relatable character that a show like Nia needs to have. Her deeply personal inner struggles, both with the absurd and with the simple everyday life, are many of the reasons why I regard the show so highly. You're always rooting for Mayu because you can feel for her so well. She takes things one step at a time and hopes for the best. In that way, you can really respect her as a character. She's a great anchor for an otherwise very strange show. Then there's Nia. She represents the wackiness that happens in the world. Remember that alien mothership I mentioned earlier? Yeah, so Nia is part of a group of aliens who crashed onto Earth and are now living amongst the humans on Earth. They can be identified by an antenna on their head. The thing is, Nia has no antenna, so she's considered an Under 7, which is considered the lowest form of her kind. I think the other characters are great too. The father and daughter at the restaurant, Mayu's friend from college, Chiaki, Genzo, and the others of the Enoshima bathhouse are all executed wonderfully and enhance the show's themes and Mayu's character tenfold. While they themselves aren't the best developed side characters around, I still think they're great for this show. They all have their own roles in the plot that make them memorable. The show does have some light social commentary about stereotypes and social classes, but I don't think it's really that important to the main plot. Again, the main themes revolve around Mayu and how she interacts with the world, living in the country versus living in the city, Mayu's self-consciousness, and the value of childhood. Even Mayu's interactions with Nia, the representation of the absurdity of the world, are all things that this show touches on. Nia has some interesting pacing. About 80% of the time, it's a very slow and relaxing show in the way that it helps tell the show's main story. There are many moments when the slow moments are interrupted by a brief slapstick moment that breaks things up a bit. This kind of pacing isn't for everyone, but I found no problems with it. It's just how chaotic the world can be sometimes. Nia, like Lain, is very old. It definitely has aged, but I think it aged like a fine beverage that ages well. The show's plain art style and sometimes choppy looking animation by today's standards make the slower paced moments feel that much better, and the wild slapstick moments way cheesier and goofier. And that's what slapstick's all about, isn't it? The music also helps the show a lot. The opening theme is probably one of the saddest sounding, down-to-earth opening songs I've ever heard in anime. The show has a lot of acoustic guitar that makes the country summertime vibe it goes for shine a lot. All topped off with the ending song that gets stuck in my head on a daily basis. It's no Fooly Cooly, but it isn't trying to be Fooly Cooly either. I think that Nia is a criminally overlooked show that doesn't get enough discussion. It may not be as iconic and interesting as Serial Experiments Lain, But it doesn't have to be. The show is slow, methodic, and mostly relaxed in its presentation. It definitely won't make you cry or anything, but it might teach you a lesson, and it will certainly tell you a really good story that'll leave you satisfied. Nia Under 7 was a doujinshi manga series by the legendary character designer Yoshitoshi Abe. It was animated by the now dissolved Studio Triangle staff in 2000. The anime was directed by Tomokazu Tokoro and Takuya Sato, and produced by Yasuyuki Ueda. It was the final anime by Triangle staff who stopped animation in 2002. For an anime almost as old as I am, I think Nia does have its flaws, but it's definitely worth a watch. Well folks, I guess that does it for this episode of Animanga. If you have an anime you want me to take a look at, crash your UFO into Twitter and tweet me at ZTVGoofingOff with the hashtag Animanga. Until next time, I'm Drew Brown and this has been another wonderful episode of Animanga.